part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hey everybody, what's happening? I'm Scott Sabol, one of the brothers here on the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
And I'm John Sabol. Scott, it's going by pretty fast already. It just seems like yesterday we were talking about doing this.
It is, yeah. And we're lining up, guests coming up here in the next couple of weeks, which we'll talk about later on. But, it's been real busy here in Cleveland with sports. We had the NBA draft. Of course, we also talk about Terry Francona, who's going to be out for the rest of the season. Thoughts and prayers with him getting healthy. But that kind of leads us right into football season.
Yeah, when the Cavs are done with the draft, Evan Mobley, great pick, and the Indians are fluttering and falling out of contention. It's focused now, Brownstown, baby.
This is the first time in a long time I'm really looking forward to the beginning of the Brown season, with watching every game for the last, 35, 40 years. But this season seems to be something special.
The hype is there. The anticipation is like little kids on Christmas Eve, waiting for Santa Claus to come. And hopefully Santa Claus this year could bring us the Lombardi Trophy, in February, a little bit later. We got a long way to go before we get there.
Sure.
But training camp's here, and it's really exciting. And the anticipation is building by the day, by the practice, and preseason coming up right away. And Scott, it's funny. We talk about the training camp, and there's been a lot of years the Browns have been really bad, and it's kind of like, okay, you go through the motions. You're going to be bad. We know they're going to be good this year, but this kind of resembles a little bit. I was a little young. You know this better than I do. Back in that late 80s. Well, the 80s, but late 80s, early 90s, when there was some anticipation, maybe not as high as it is now, but it's similar.
It reminds me, yes, especially after we faced Denver, a couple of times. It was around that time. Yeah, I would say 87, 88, 89, which leads us into our very special guest that I remember watching as, for me, it would have been high school. For you, it would have been a little kid. But this guy's something special.
Yes, he played for the Browns for 6 seasons in the late 80s, early 90s, and racked up more than 30 career touchdowns as a member of the Cleveland Browns in a variety of different positions. That's a little clue coming up here. We've got a fantastic interview with him coming up. We'll break everything down for the current Browns. We'll go back in time to those glory years at the Municipal Stadium and much more coming up right after this. You're listening to the Sabol Brothers on the Baseline Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network.
Hi, my name is Jeremy Powell, co-host of the Oranges Oranger Browns podcast. Check us out anywhere you listen to podcasts. For all your Browns coverage, post-game, pre-game, anything you need Browns, you'll find it here on the Oranges Oranger Browns podcast.
Hey everybody, it's Sam Amico from Cavs on the Break NBA podcast. Be sure to give us a listen for all your Cleveland Cavaliers recaps, analysis, breakdowns, draft talk, free agency. The list goes on and on. Give us a listen, Cavs on the Break NBA podcast.
The R&R podcast going to be rocking and rolling with you because football season is underway. College, Ohio State, the Power Fives, the MAC, the Browns. Michael Regai, are you ready to rock and roll with some football?
Kenny, I've been ready. This is our time of year. This is what R&R is all about. We're going to be with you every week. Kenny just said it. Browns, NFL, Ohio State centric. So you got to stay with us all fall and winter long here on R&R.
That's right. The Regai and Rhoda podcast coming to you here on the Press Play Podcast Network. Subscribe now and don't miss a show.
Welcome back to Sabol Brothers on the Baseline Podcast, part of the Press Play Podcast Network. One of the most electrifying Cleveland Browns of all time and one of my favorite players growing up joins us now. Eric Metcalf, how you doing?
I'm doing fine. How are you? First question I got to ask you, am I only one of your favorite because I'm the one being interviewed?
No, actually, you would be number one of my favorite Browns players, and then Bernie Kosar, full disclosure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I appreciate you, man.
GV Art, the clothing store in Cleveland.
Oh, yeah.
You teamed up with them last year and they made a nice little shirt with your number and like a caricature and like a cartoon type of design.
The one with the boat.
Yeah.
From the Steelers game. Yeah.
Yes. So that game, and we'll talk about that, Eric, is one of my favorite Browns games ever growing up watching when you had that spectacular game.
Eric, this is Scott Sabol here in Cleveland. Always a pleasure. So, Eric, what are you up to these days? I know we talked about, and we'll get into the glory years of the Browns back in the late 80s, early 90s. But what are you up to these days, especially now that we're finishing out the summer, heading into early football season?
I like to consider myself a professional homeboy. I just sit around and chill out and smoke cigars and have a few drinks. No, but I currently do consulting with Nike Track and Field. During the season, I do the pregame, postgame show with Channel 19 in Cleveland, obviously, and then I just started my own cigar line as well.
Really? Oh, that's interesting. Because my brother and I, well, we'll talk more about that, but that's kind of right up our alley.
Okay. So what are you asking but not asking?
Well, we'll get to that a little later.
You know what, Scott? Let's go right into that right now while we're there.
Let's go for it. Yeah, I mean, my brother and I always enjoy a nice cigar every once in a while, and we're also have really gotten into Scotch over the years. And for me personally, once I get into something, I have to learn all about it. I have to learn how it's made, and kind of the same thing with cigars, but to a lesser level. What's your experiences? I mean, you have a new cigar line. How did that all come about? And explain the process. That's interesting.
It's a long, crazy, ridiculous story of how I actually met the person who makes the cigars. But I actually started smoking cigars earlier in my career. When I was in college at Texas, in fact, I used to walk around with cigars in my mouth, but I never lit them up. But I had an infatuation with the taste of it, but then they come to me and they said, "Hey, we can't have you walking around campus with cigars in your mouth and everything. That's really that's not a good look, really." And so I put them down. But once I got to the NFL, I was like, "Hey, I'm grown. I can do whatever I want. They can't do anything." So now I can actually light it.
Right.
And I had never really been a smoker. I never smoked cigarettes or anything, but there was something about the taste of the tobacco that got me smoking cigars. And so fast forward many years later, I meet my friend Alberto Rivera, and we're in Jacksonville smoking cigars. We get to a point where we're like, let's start a line, and that's what we did. And 2 years later, we're here.
Did you pick out different types of tobacco, and then you came up with a blend?
Yeah. So which kind of made it easy was I had a little cigar party, and I asked him to roast some cigars for me, and so he did. So we produced about 30, 40 cigars for my friends, and everybody liked it. But we went through that off taste as well. And I after that I was like, let's do it. And we did it, but we had to change the blend from what that cigar was. But we were trying to get as close as that as possible. And we finally did. So he had me taste all kind of cigars, all kind of blends and everything, just to get to where I really wanted it.
Eric, what's the name of your cigar company, or the name of your cigars?
It's the EM21s.
Okay. Your initials and your number. Yes.
And you can find them at prohibitioncigars.com. All
right. That was my next follow-up question. Where are we going to find those?
You do it, see? I'm faster than you.
Well, you know what? Of course you are. Yeah. Scott and I like a good cigar every once in a while with our scotch or with bourbon or anything like that. Real quick, I know some of the pictures on social media. You do post a lot of pictures of your cigars. Any good scotch that you prefer?
I don't know. When you're a wino, you just drink whatever, right? If I'm an everyday guy, if it's an everyday type of thing, I think I like to drink Woodford Reserve Double Oak. That's like my everyday, my go-to. But if I'm drinking scotch, I have some Balvenie 14.
There you go.
Macallans, some Abalors. I venture around. My thing is, I don't really try to pair it to cigars, really. When I go to certain bars, when I'm in different cities, I go to bars, I try to always taste something that I don't have at home.
There you go.
Just so I can get a taste of it. So, that's why it's kind of hard to figure out which one I really like the most, because I try to taste so many.
Albalauer is very good. You got McCallan. They have a sweet finish to them, and those are, you got to be in the mood for some of those smoky ones, but those are some really good go-to scotches right there.
Yeah, because I'm not one of those guys who likes it real peaty.
Yeah.
So I got to stay away from that.
And that McAllen has a nice sherry oak finish to it.
Yes.
Yeah. Very cool. Well, whenever you're in town, man, that'd be great. We should sometime meet up, have a cigar and a scotch or something. That'd be great.
See, you're limiting yourself because you said a cigar and a scotch. I'm not one of those guys.
All right. Well, you know what? Well, Scott and I will have to plan ahead. That way we can make it work even longer. That'd be awesome.
I need all that to be plural.
I like it. Love it. All right, Eric, let's talk a little bit about the Browns here. And you're living on the West Coast right now, right?
Yes.
Where at exactly?
Seattle, Washington, where I'm born and raised.
Seattle. Okay. So that's right. You'd be close to Nike right there. How often do you come back to Cleveland, and how many Browns games do you attend? I know you said you still do the pregame show, but are you there for the away games as well?
So I do. Well, I guess it'll be 9 home games this year. So I'll definitely be at those. And then it depends on, most of the time, if Browns backers have me come to the city that they're playing in. So I think I'm going to Kansas City this year. LA when they play the Chargers, and I know I'm going to a Browns backers game, but it won't be when they play Pittsburgh, but I'll be in Tampa. I'll actually be in Tampa for when they play Pittsburgh on that Monday night.
Oh, all right.
Exactly. So yeah, so as of right now, I only know that I'll be at 2 away games.
Okay. Good deal. Well, I'll have to drop you a line when you're in my backyard.
All right, you do that so we can have a scotch and a cigar.
Well, if that's the case, then we're going to have plural, just like you say. I won't hold back.
Right.
So, Eric, before we start diving into the Browns here, some of the younger Browns fans listening to this, and even some of the older ones, may not know that your dad, Terry, played 6 seasons, with the Cardinals, and he had a really solid career. You look at his stats. How much of his success drove you to want to make it into the NFL?
100% of his success made me want to be in the NFL. Yeah. I mean, here's the thing. When my dad, my mother and father, they had me when they were in high school. So that means when I'm 6, 7 years old, my dad is still young, relatively young. So I get to watch all those games. So I really want to be like my dad. I mean, at that time, most guys wanted to grow up to be like their dad, whatever they did. Fireman, policeman, football player, it didn't really matter. They wanted to do what their dad did because that's what they were proud of. My dad just happened to be a football player. And so when he went out there and played and did well, that's all I could think about was trying to be better than Terry Metcalf. I didn't want to be like him. I wanted to be better than him. I mean, even at a young age, I started copying his signature because I was like, I'm going to the pros and I'm going to be better than this guy. And so, that was just my mindset. And I don't know if I am better than him. That's for every person to decide amongst themselves. But I feel like my career is comparable.
Very cool. It's awesome always to see a father and son in playing in one league and one following the other. I always like that. You always look at the in fact where you are right now, the Griffeys, of course, in baseball. Very cool. All right, let's go back. Draft day 1989. Eric, Browns come on the clock, first round. They're at pick number 13. They select a speedy running back out of Texas, which was you. Did you know that was coming? And at first, were you excited to come to Cleveland and be a Brown?
Well, here's the deal. I actually traded to get that 13th pick with the Broncos. The 14th pick would have been the Jets, I believe, and I thought I was going to get drafted by the Jets. At that time, I wanted to go to the Rams, but they were in the late 20s. But I wanted to play in LA. For some reason, I wanted to be in LA. I felt like I was a superstar. In my mind, I was a superstar, and I needed to be in LA. But then the draft was coming around. Mike Lombardi, who was working with the Browns at the time, came to visit me in Texas a few days before the draft. He was trying to get me to do a whole bunch of tests, speed and agility tests, and I would not do it. And he said, we're thinking about drafting you. I said, okay, but I'm not doing it. I had just finished playing basketball. I didn't know they were coming and what have you. And so I was like, there's no way I'm doing this, because I'm 5'10", 182 pounds. If I do this test right now and I don't run as fast, this is my thinking, and I don't run as fast as you think I should run, where does that leave me? Are you still thinking about drafting me wherever you're going to draft me? So I'm just going to let you go off what you saw on film. And so I didn't do it.
Smart move.
And then I fly to Seattle for the draft to be with my family and everything. We're watching the draft, all my family, and I hear the Denver Broncos have made the trade with the Cleveland Browns for the 13th pick. But I never really thought about being a Cleveland Brown. Then fast forward again, after the draft, we go to minicamp. And I'm there, but I can't go through minicamp because I don't have a contract. And so they don't want to give me an insurance policy in case I get hurt or whatever. And so my agent was like, "You're not practice." So I'm standing around, and it's May. And what happens? It starts snowing. I'm like, oh, damn. It's May. It's snowing. We're playing on natural grass. I can just imagine how this is going to be in November and December.
That was a steep learning curve, right?
I'm like, yeah, I'm like, this isn't going to work. I'm coming from Austin, Texas, playing on AstroTurf, and I'm getting at least 7 degrees every game. I don't think this is going to work for me. And so I wasn't too sure. And then I held out, didn't come to the last preseason game, played in that. And from that moment on, I knew that Cleveland was my spot. I mean, the players took me in. They loved me, even though they said they didn't like me in the beginning when I first came from minicamp. The Kevin Max and the Reggie Langhorns, they said they didn't like me when they first met me. But that's okay. They're like my best friends now. But back then, when they first met me, they did not like me. But those guys took me in, brought me in like I was a brother, like I'd been playing for years. And then playing for a franchise where the fan base is so supportive was just made it even easier.
So you got the glory years of the Browns, right? From the late 80s through 1995. I mean, there were some pretty special teams there. You were already coming into a team that was already established. Do you have a favorite Browns memory or a favorite Cleveland Municipal Stadium memory? You know, the stadium's gone. It was demolished a long time ago, but is there something that stands out in your mind playing in that old park?
Well, I just love the aura of that stadium. I mean, I go into the new stadium and I'm like, it's not the same.
Yeah,
it's not.
Yeah,
you can call that the dog pound all you want, but it's not the same. It's not the same as me running into the dog pound after scoring a touchdown and then running back to the bench smelling like beer. You're not getting that anymore. And
right.
Those are the type of things I remember. Just those guys, just hearing people talk about what the bathrooms look like up in there.
Yeah, the trough bathrooms.
I obviously never experienced, but I did experience the visiting locker room, and I know I would have never wanted to visit there as a player because it was so terrible up in there. But it was. I remember being in there and maybe Cincinnati, my rookie year, and it was so cold and the water was coming out cold and everything that guys couldn't even take a shower after the game. Just went home because back then the old stadium we had to dress in separate. The older guys were downstairs and the younger guys were upstairs in a little room. So so many things about that stadium and the fan base that just made it great. That I wish they could have, when they redid the stadium, I wish they would have just kept the structure of it, just like the Packers did. Just keep the structure and just make everything new.
Yeah, I agree. Something to keep it, keep a little nostalgia, maybe like a section and move and build around it. Right. It's funny. You see a lot of people talk about the old stadium, and Scott and I went there a lot when we were younger for Indians games and Browns games, and it always got a bad rap for what you're saying. And fair criticism. It's like, oh, it's a dump. Yeah, it was a dump, but it was our dump, and she was beautiful, Right. So
But you know, but when you think about people visiting and calling it a dunk, what does that do? That means they're uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. That's what home field advantage is about, right? Mm-hmm. Why should you have a locker room for the visitors that is just as good as the home team? They're not uncomfortable. What advantage do you have, right, other than the fans being loud? And that's if you're winning, right?
Mm-hmm.
Right? But if you have the opportunity to create any negative thoughts in their mind, then why not do it? That's home field advantage.
And it worked for so many years.
Right.
And it especially worked for you on one memorable night in October of '93. And we alluded to it earlier in the interview here. You guys are facing the Steelers, and you had those two unbelievable kick returns for touchdowns, 75-yard punt return in the fourth quarter. And then before that, in the first quarter, you had a 91-yard punt return. And then that's with that shirt from GV Art, and has been made posters and been plastered everywhere of that famous picture of you towing the line and the Steelers defender trying to grab you. You were in the zone that night. You racked up some ridiculous stats, Eric.
But you just cheated me at 1 yard because it was 92.
92, okay. That's my bad, okay.
You cheated me at 1 yard, I believe. You can look it up if you want, but I believe. But you know what was really going through my mind that night was the fact that going into the game, I didn't think I was going to play.
Really? Why?
We played Cincinnati the previous week, and I sprained my knee a little bit. So I didn't practice at all that week until Friday. I went through some things because Bill Belichick had a little rule that if you didn't practice on Friday, you couldn't play in the game. And so I did a little bit on that Friday just to show him I'd be all okay. And then so waking up Sunday morning, I was like, oh, I don't know. I had to go in early, get wrapped up and everything, but it worked out. You know, this was, my dad always says, sometimes when you're hurt, you play the fastest because it slows everything down for you. And I felt like that's what happened that night.
And full disclosure, I just looked it up on footballreference.com. They have you listed as a 91-yard punt return.
Uh-oh.
They're cheating me too.
Uh-oh. I just want to make sure that you know that it wasn't. I got it from them, and they're pretty accurate. But hey, everyone makes mistakes.
I backed it up, and I backed up to make it 92.
Yeah, the 1 yard back, right? Absolutely. Yeah, you had a lot. You had 53 rushing yards that game, 166 total returning yards, or 167 if you count that extra yard. And then 18 yards of receiving on 3 catches. That's incredible. You don't see a lot of guys do that these days, Eric. So that's one of my favorite Browns memories.
Well, you know, I think there are a lot of guys who could do it. And I mean, especially the way the game is played today. That's why I would love to play today, because they don't take you guys who are built like me don't have to come out. They can now be every down guys because the field is spread out so much. They're not expecting people to pound in between the tackles for 3 downs or 2 downs and then pass the ball. So you have guys like Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, and Dalvin Cook, guys who catch the ball a lot and run the ball a lot also. And, you know, Christian and Dalvin, they probably could return kicks or punts if they wanted to, but they're just, because they are the franchise running back guys, they're not giving them that opportunity, so they have someone else do it. But, you know, like we always said, in everything, the more you can do, keeps you around longer, right? And so that's why, you know, I just like the fact that I had the ability to do all those things. But it's a gift and a curse, because when you're able to do all these things, no one ever has you really do one thing. And so people look at me and say, oh, he's not a running back. He didn't run for that many yards. He's not a receiver. He didn't have that many receptions or catch for that many yards. He was a returner. And so that's how people look at you differently, because you were able to do all those things.
Kind of leads into our next question. You know, you had 7,000 offensive yards, you had 7,000 special teams yards, kickoffs, punt returns. You know, you were eligible for the Hall of Fame back in 2002. It's almost like your own versatility seems like you said, it might be working against you a little bit.
I think so, because no one really thinks about it that way. 17,000 yards, I was in the top 10 all time at the time of my retirement. And so once again, if I had rushed for 10,000 yards and then had like 2,000 or 3,000 receiving and some punt return 1,000 yards in returning, then people are probably like, that's a no-brainer. But because I never got the opportunity to do one thing full time, it's like a check against me. But it doesn't really matter, because when it's all said and done, I'm happy with what I was able to accomplish.
Eric, one more question just about the Browns past in your career before we talk about this current Browns team. I mean, you were traded to Atlanta before the Browns moved. So you weren't actually with the Browns when they moved. When you found out that they were moving to Baltimore, when Art Modell made that move, if that happened today, the equivalent would be like the Chicago Cubs moving out of Wrigley and moving to somewhere else. Obviously, it killed Cleveland. It hurt the fan base. It hurt the NFL. Your reaction when it happened, where were you? Do you remember that day?
I was in Atlanta, obviously, when I heard it, and but I was hurt as if I was still on that team. I felt like I was moving, because when you play for a storied franchise like the Browns, and then you become someone that people really liked and admired when you played there, it grows on you. It becomes a piece of your heart. And so for them to be moved, I was like, I felt for the fans. I felt for the city of Cleveland, because I was like, this is the Cleveland Browns. There's a storied franchise, and now they're not going to have a team. And at that point, you're thinking, will they ever have a team? You never know at that point. Mm-hmm. And so it makes it even rougher, because you have no idea what's going to happen.
So the stadium right after you were traded was torn down. I think it was that following winter. Do you have a piece of anything from the old stadium? Did you happen to get a little piece of something?
No, and I tried, and I just couldn't do it. And then I'd find people online where they're trying to beat me over the head to buy something from them. But I'm like, I actually worked there. And
Right.
And you want to sell it to me like that? You sat in those seats to come watch me. And now you want to sell it to me.
Eric, what would you want from the stadium if you had a choice? If you went into let's say a Cleveland Municipal Stadium memorabilia store, what would you want? A brick, a sign, a seat, your locker?
Back when it first happened, I wanted seats.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wanted seats for sure.
Well, I'm going to tell you something that's going to make you really jealous. You ready?
No.
Scott and I both have a seat.
Uh-oh.
Oh man. Yeah, it was, but you know what, Eric, it's not my fault. Scott's the one that got it for me. So, if he would have known back then, he should have got you one.
I knew a guy. It's a long story.
I wanted two. And you both have those seats that I wanted.
Oh man. That's funny. Well, I know Scott and I are really curious to know about your take on this Browns team this season.
Well, I'm one of those guys. I'm usually, when I look at them every year, I'm almost like a fan. I'm a little more optimistic than most people are. And so I'm one of those guys who will just throw out a record that I think they're going to beat. Last year, I said 11-5. This year, I say, looking at the schedule.
Uh-oh, here it is.
I'm going out there.
You want a drum roll?
No, I don't need it.
Okay.
I feel good about it. I'm going 13-4.
Ooh.
I'm going 13-4. Which sounds weird, right?
Yeah, it sounds kind of odd.
13-4. That just sounds weird.
It does sound weird with the extra game this year.
That sounds weird, but I'm going 13-4. Just looking at the schedule, I think, and I think I was being generous when I said 4. I mean, because I just threw it in. Like I don't really think that they can lose 4 games.
Yeah,
but I'll just throw a loss in just because.
So what are your concerns about the Browns? Anything that stands out as a weakness that maybe they haven't addressed, or something that you think that they need to address, to tie all this together?
I really think, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski have done a great job of bringing in players and going into the draft. What made me feel really good about it was like, this is one of the first years we're not looking for a savior, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're looking for someone or some guys to come in and make an 11-5 team better. And so that's why I feel so good about it, because you're getting guys who were injured coming back. You're getting opt-outs coming back. You had the draft class, and so you're not only filling this roster, you're just filling this roster with depth. You're making the team that was already good better. Now my concern is when they show up in between those white lines, do they just expect to win just because of what happened last year? Because they were a very good team. Are we going to go to camp and through every week preparing like every team could beat us? That's what I need. That's what I need to see happen. And if we do that, I feel like we have a very good chance of going 13-4.
You got the regular season prediction record down there. Where do you think they go in the playoffs?
You're hurting me right now.
Putting you on the spot.
I'm telling you now. I'm telling you why. Because I was in Vegas last week, and I had to talk myself down. I'm like, I should go in this sports book and play some money for them to win it all.
And?
But I'm such a fan that I don't want to jinx it, so I couldn't do it. I can't do it. I cannot say where they will go. I just hope that they get in a tournament with a home game. Do that, then anything can happen.
I respect that. Yeah, no jinx. The jinx is real.
The jinx is real. I don't want to be a part of that. I don't want to feel like I'm a part of it. I mean, I'm one of those guys. During the season when these guys are playing, when I'm here, when I'm at home, I put the same thing on. And if they lose, I change the next time. I'm that's how I am.
I get it.
I have to put my jersey over my left shoulder. That kind of stuff. I'm one of those guys. I mean, that's how I was as a player. That's how I am as a fan.
Nothing wrong with that. So, Eric, before we let you go, we wanted to throw out some rapid fire, just general questions for you. Okay, these are just like your favorite meal type questions. Nothing too hard. You ready?
Okay.
All right. And we kind of talked about this earlier. And who's your all-time favorite Browns teammate? Doesn't have to be one person. We'll keep it open-ended. Any guys that you really hung with, that you really keep in touch with now?
Kevin Mack, Reggie Langhorne, rest in peace, Eric Turner. Mm-hmm. And then, I mean, Bernie Kosar, of course. But, because we're all still a close-knit group, other than E.T., of course, because he passed away. But, yeah, but for the most part, it's those guys.
Outside of Cleveland, your favorite NFL city?
To play in? Well, as a player, I loved playing against the Raiders when they were in L.A.
Okay.
Favorite pregame meal?
Scrambled eggs.
Really?
Yes. I'm one of those. I don't like to eat before I go.
That's light.
So I would eat scrambled eggs and get on about my business.
No veggies, no cheese, just straight?
Maybe some cheese, but just get on. Let's go. Let's go do it.
Your all-time favorite movie?
Scarface.
Ooh, that's a good one.
Favorite athlete in or out of the NFL?
Terry Metcalf.
I knew you were going to say that.
Nice.
All right, favorite TV show you're streaming right now?
That I'm streaming.
Or DVD or a VHS if
whatever.
you happen to have a tape. I'm old.
Did you say beta?
Yeah, right.
Actually, let's go laser disc while we're at it.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. What am I watching right now? Everything is on. I watch Power right now.
There you go.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm not one of those guys who's into. I can't just like go watch show over and over and over again. You have to really get me. So.
One NFL team you look forward to facing the most each and every week?
The Oilers.
Ooh.
It was the Oilers.
Old school AFC Central rivalry. And one last bonus question. Do you give Baker Mayfield a contract now or after this upcoming season?
I'm torn. I'm torn. So I don't. I'm torn. Can I tell you why I'm torn?
Go for it.
Because Baker he's a very good football player. We have so many guys around him that as long as we go out there and stick to running the ball well, it makes it easier for the play action game, and he can be very successful. He doesn't have to go out there and be the savior. He doesn't have to go out there and throw 300, 400 yards a game in order for us to win, which I love. I'm sure you guys love that as well.
Mm-hmm.
There will be times that he has to do that. But I think with the team that we have, and I'm not saying get rid of him or anything, I think that as long as someone can do that same job, we can still be successful. So that's what makes it hard for me, because we can still be successful if we have someone who can do the things that he does. I'm not saying that they'll be better than him or worse than him, but we don't know if you can get somebody to come in and do those things. We don't know what happens when the next guy comes if you don't sign him. So I guess I would say sign him.
So I got one more follow-up, and this isn't a sports question, but you talked about your cigars. I notice you're enjoying a cigar right now. How do you light your cigars? Do you have a butane lighter? Do you use those cedar chips? You know, you can light a cedar chip and light a cigar. What's your favorite way to light a cigar?
You're going to have to pay for the last question because he just said there's one more question.
You know, we see the smoke emanating, and now we're getting like thirsty and savoring up trying to get a cigar ourselves.
Because it's 4 o'clock here.
There's a torch.
Oh, there you go. Gotcha.
Yeah. The torch and just light it up.
Very nice. Eric, it's always a pleasure. Thanks for spending a half hour with us on this afternoon here. Well, it's 1 o'clock your time out at the West Coast. And thanks for your insight, your memories, looking back to how it was back in the day. We always like a little nostalgia on the show. And, talking with you guys back in the day, it brings me back. It brings all of us back to the glory days when the Browns were, at the top of the game. And now that the Browns are ascending, we'll probably hit that and hopefully go beyond.
They're back at the top of the game. We was going to go. We just got to stay there.
That's right.
We can't be one-hit wonders.
Yeah. You can follow Eric at Eric Metcalf 21 on Twitter, or also check out his cigars, EM21. That's his initials in playing number on prohibitionscigars.com. Scott and I are going to have to get some of those, Eric.
Prohibitionscigars.com. You can get them. You just read it. You know
we're going to get some and then get back to you about what we like, which one's our favorite. So thanks so much for your time, man. Maybe we can catch up with you again once the season gets underway.
All right. Appreciate you guys.
See you, Eric.
Take care.
All right.
Well, that was awesome. Great conversation here with Eric Metcalf. 6 years with the Browns. I remember watching. It's funny because when you look back and you talk about the Browns of those years, you think 6 years, that's a long time. But when you're a kid, for me in high school, 6 years, thinking back, that seems like it was 15 years because those years were so powerful. They leave an indelible mark in your head because of how good the Browns were.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Same thing with the Indians in the 90s. That's how it was for me. Because I was too young in those years. I vaguely remember some of those games for whatever reason. And I honestly got truth. I do remember that Steelers Monday night game, or that night, it was a Sunday night game. I think it was like a 4 o'clock kick.
Right.
I looked up a reference, but I remember it was dark when he returned those 2 kicks. So, I would have been in elementary school, but I do remember watching that game. I assume you might have been there. I know you were in school then. It was probably with Dad.
Right.
But
right.
And then when I watched those highlights on YouTube, it kind of, re-clicked some things of that time for me. But those years, man, I missed out being before born, and then I was born too young to really appreciate those 80s Browns teams.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And talking with Eric, it's interesting hearing his perspective. He's from the West Coast. Most people from the West Coast back then, they didn't, they heard about the Browns. They knew the Browns were good. He didn't really have necessarily any vested interest in the Browns because he lived thousands of miles away. But once he was drafted and once he came here, you could tell he was assimilated just into the culture and the Browns, just the Browns family. And now he loves coming back. He comes back, how many times did he say? 8, 9 times a year? And he wants a stadium seat too, which is funny. He still doesn't have one.
He got pretty upset with me when I said that. Maybe not upset. That's a little dramatic. A little jealous, a little envious, if you will. But yeah, I mean, that's really cool that he wanted a piece like that, because that's something you and I really like to do when we talk about the old stadiums and everything. Yep. I love that part. He embraced the culture. He embraced the fandom. He embraced the city of Cleveland back then. And he is still a fan of the Browns. He can't give you a prediction on their playoff run because he doesn't want to jinx them. I love that. Because
he's a fan. He's a fan now. He's not just a player. He's on the outside looking in. He was sitting there and we could see him, but obviously, the listeners can't see him, but he was smoking a cigar. He loves cigars, and which might not be the best for you, but hey, once in a great while is not a bad thing, I don't think. And then he loves scotch, and he talked about how he loved Macallan. Macallan 12 and all those scotches, which we've tried before. And so it's like, wow, we could do a whole episode on, we should do an episode, something about scotch and cigars, but that's looking down the line sometime. Yeah, absolutely. And the funny thing is, I had no idea that he has his own cigar line. Right. That's on prohibitionscigars.com. If anybody listening, if you're into cigars, go there. His own cigar is EM21. That's his initials and his number he played in with the Browns, 21. That's super cool. Very cool. Because I've seen on social media, on Twitter, he posted pictures. So I'm like, I had to ask him. And then he was talking about it, and we saw it. And I'm like, this is perfect. So a very cool hobby for him. And just a really all-around good, down-to-earth guy. A fan favorite still. Very active in Cleveland. He's part of that pregame show. He does a lot still, in the NFL and working for Nike now. I didn't know he was in Seattle working for Nike as a track and field consultant. Very fast guy. One of the fastest guys in the league, in the history of the league, for that matter. And we also talked about and when we interviewed Mark Price a while back, about how his dad was a big influence. Big influence. He was in the NFL, and he wanted to be better than his dad. Even now, he doesn't know if he's necessarily better than how his dad was, but that's cool that he has that connection. There's a lot of people who don't have that connection to their parents for whatever reason, and it's neat to see that, and that was a big motivator for him. And he said his favorite athlete outside of the NFL, in or out. I was thinking he was going to maybe go like a Michael Jordan, or if he was going to go maybe in the NFL, maybe he would have said Jim Brown or Walter Payton or something like that. He went right to Terry Metcalf. How cool is that? That's awesome. That's great. Well, this is a fun episode, Scott. The Browns are right around the corner. The season's going to get underway shortly. Eric was fantastic with his time. I'm glad we got to talk to him. And we'll be doing a lot more Brown stuff as the season gets closer. As we kind of shift our attention away from, not totally, from baseball and basketball into football season. So tune in for that. Thanks for listening, everyone. Again, you're listening to Sabol Brothers on the Baseline Podcast, all part of the Press Play Podcast Network. Take care.